Pancake morning blues. The bear's arm dangled by a thread. Leo sighed, threading the needle with practiced ease. Patches, Lily called him, though he was more bald than furry these days. Each stitch was a tiny act of repair, a silent promise to mend whatever else was broken. Almost as good as new, he murmured, knotting the thread and snipping it close. Lily, perched on the edge of her bed, didn't respond. He glanced over. Her small fingers traced the outline of a photograph, a faded image of her mom laughing, sunlight catching in her hair. Leo's chest tightened. It had been 3 years, but the ache remained, a dull throb beneath the surface. He cleared his throat. Patches is ready for duty. Super cuddles activated. Lily managed a weak smile, accepting the bear. She hugged him tight, burying her face in his worn fur. He misses mommy too. Leo sat beside her, putting an arm around her small shoulders. I know, sweetie. Me too. He hated these moments, the raw, exposed grief that bubbled up unexpectedly. He felt so ill-equipped to handle it, like a clumsy mechanic trying to fix a delicate watch. He needed a distraction, something to lift the mood. How about pancakes tomorrow? He suggested, forcing a cheerfulness he didn't quite feel. At Rosie's diner. The ones with the chocolate chips. Lily's head popped up. Really? But, money. Leo ruffled her hair, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his stomach. He'd been avoiding Rosie's, knowing it was a luxury they couldn't really afford. But seeing Lily so down, he'd figure something out. Let's just say I've been saving my pennies. Now go brush your teeth. Pancake power requires a clean smile. After Lily scampered off, Leo went to the kitchen. He pulled the chipped ceramic piggy bank from the top of the refrigerator and shook it. A meager rattle. He emptied the contents onto the counter, a jumble of quarters, dimes, and a few stray nickels. He counted, carefully arranging them into neat stacks. Enough for 2 short stacks and maybe, just maybe, a small tip. It would be tight, but they'd manage. He always did. He glanced back at the photograph Lily had been holding, now resting on her nightstand. He picked it up, running a thumb over the smooth surface. Her smile was infectious, a beacon of warmth that still managed to cut through the gloom. He tucked the photo into his wallet, close to his heart. He had to make this work. For Lily. For her mom. He just hoped he was enough. The diner plan felt like a desperate gamble, a small act of defiance against the relentless tide of worry. But he would take any chance to see Lily smile again. Missing mommy. The diner bell's cheery jingle was a stark contrast to the pall that had settled over Lily. Leo squeezed her small hand as they entered the familiar space, usually a haven. The aroma of frying bacon, normally her favorite, felt cloying today. Even the ruby-red booths seemed muted, drained of their usual vibrancy. Daddy? Her voice, a tiny thread, barely cut through the kitchen's clamor. Yeah, sweet pea. He steered her toward their usual window seat. Is mommy coming home soon? She swung her legs, the motion jittery and uneven. Leo's chest constricted. This question, the inevitable question, always arrived too quickly, and he was never prepared. He slid into the booth with a sigh, hoping the weariness wouldn't register on her young face. Mommy's tied up, Lilybug. She's working really hard. Doing what? Her eyes, mirroring Clara's azure gaze, searched his. He stalled, fussing with a napkin, pleating and folding it with excessive care. She's helping people. A thinly veiled evasion at best. Clara was helping people by disappearing to who knew where, leaving a void in their lives. Lily remained unconvinced. But she used to help us. A single tear breached her defenses, carving a glistening track down her cheek. Guilt stabbed at Leo. He reached out, gently swiping the tear away with his thumb. I know, honey. And she loves us very much. He doubted the truth of that statement more and more each day. Doris, the waitress with the kind smile and a Doris name tag, materialized with her order pad. The usual for you too, Leo? He nodded, welcoming the interruption. Pancakes for the little one, drown them in syrup. And just coffee for me, Doris, thanks. As Doris headed for the kitchen, Lily's gaze bored into him. When will she be done helping? He rummaged in his backpack, seeking refuge in her coloring book. Soon, Lily. Real soon. He placed the book and crayons on the table. Hey, why don't you draw me a picture? A super-duper picture of a brave knight rescuing a princess. He forced enthusiasm into his tone, but it rang false even to his own ears. Lily picked up a crayon, a sunny yellow, yet hesitated. She clutched it tightly in her small fist, her gaze fixed on the bustling street outside. Her bottom lip quivered. I miss mommy. Leo reached across the table, his weathered hand enveloping hers. I know, Peanut. So do I. He squeezed gently, wishing he could offer her more than platitudes and a counterfeit smile. He longed to conjure Clara back, not just for his daughter's sake, but for his own fractured heart. The diner suddenly felt oppressive, too bright, too noisy, filled with the echoes of other families' carefree laughter. He just wanted to scoop Lily up, retreat to the sanctuary of their apartment, and pretend the world hadn't shattered. But he knew that wouldn't fix anything. He had to be resolute for her. He had to persevere even when he felt like he was sinking. He was her anchor now. The burden of that reality pressed down on him, a crushing weight. The man with shiny shoes. Lily swiveled on her stool, the vinyl squeaking a mournful tune. The aroma of frying bacon and burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, a familiar comfort. Outside, rain lashed against the windows of the Sunshine Diner, blurring the neon glow of the open 24 hours sign into a hazy smear of pink and blue. Most of the booths were empty at this hour, only a couple of truckers hunched over plates piled high with eggs and hash browns. Her gaze drifted past the chipped sugar dispenser, the faded floral wallpaper, finally settling on a figure tucked away in a corner booth. He was a man, older, maybe grandpa age, dressed in a suit, which was odd for the Sunshine Diner on a Tuesday morning. His dark overcoat was neatly folded beside him, and his shoes, they gleamed. Not just polished, but truly shiny. Like mirrors reflecting the dull diner light. He sat ramrod straight, completely absorbed in a newspaper, a half-empty mug of coffee steaming gently in front of him. He looked important. And lonely. Lily nudged Leo, who was staring into his coffee as if searching for answers at the bottom of the mug. "Dad?" Leo sighed, the sound heavy with exhaustion. "Yeah, sweetie? See that man over there?" Lily pointed subtly with her chin, careful not to be too obvious. "The one with the shiny shoes." Leo followed her gaze, his brow furrowing slightly. He took in the man's expensive suit, the impeccable grooming. "Yeah, what about him?" "He looks familiar," Lily said, chewing on her lip. She couldn't place it, but there was something about the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head, that sparked a faint recognition. A whisper of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Like I've seen him before." Leo glanced at the man again, then back at Lily, a weary smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Honey, you probably saw him on TV. He looks like the kind of guy who'd be on TV." He reached across the counter and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "Don't worry about him. Just eat your pancakes." But Lily couldn't shake the feeling. The man with the shiny shoes. He was more than just some guy on TV. He was something else. Something connected to her, somehow. "Is that my uncle?" The diner's cacophony softened to a low drone as Lily's gaze locked onto the man across the room. Age had sculpted lines into the corners of his eyes, a cartography of a life spent largely under roofs, yet his resolute jaw and high, keen brow triggered a forgotten memory. Years had passed, a chasm since her mother's departure. But now an image surfaced, vivid as a freshly minted memory, a faded photograph salvaged from a forgotten shoebox, depicting her mother, radiant, linked arm in arm with a man on a sun-drenched beach. Sunglasses obscured his eyes, but even then Lily had sensed the same gravity that now emanated from the man meticulously dissecting a croissant at table 7. "Sterling." A gasp caught in her throat. Implausible, yet. "Uncle, what was the name?" Just a letter lingered in her mind. "Uncle A." "Arthur?" She studied him anew. His silvered hair was arranged with precision, not a single strand astray. A navy suit of impeccable tailoring seemed to swallow the light around him. He appeared utterly alien amid Rosie's diner, a monarch unexpectedly dethroned into a greasy spoon. Still, the face, it resonated with familiarity. A warmth resided in the creases around his eyes, a kindness his stern demeanor struggled to mask, a warmth akin to those fleeting pictures of her mother. A tidal wave of yearning crashed over Lily, constricting her chest. Kin. Someone who had known Mom. Someone who could, perhaps, care. She glanced at her father, immersed in newsprint, a half-eaten burger growing tepid beside him. He wouldn't grasp it. He never did when she became like this, sentimental and girly, as he termed it. This was hers to navigate. Lily shoved her chair back, the metal screeching against the worn linoleum. Arthur Sterling, or, God willing, Uncle Arthur, lifted his head, his gray eyes sharp with inquiry. She inhaled deeply, the mingled sense of frying bacon and stale coffee doing little to settle her frantic pulse. Each step felt weighted as she traversed the distance. He watched her approach, his countenance inscrutable. A fleeting emotion, curiosity, irritation, flickered, then vanished behind a practiced mask. Lily halted at his table, her small hand finding purchase on the edge. "Mr. Sterling?" she managed, her voice barely audible. He gave a slight nod. Yes. I think you might be my uncle. The words tumbled out in a torrent, propelled by a fervent hope that blossomed within her. A brave little step. Lilybug, wait, Leo pleaded, his voice barely a whisper above the diner's midday bustle. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing her sleeve, but she was already wriggling free. Her eyes, wide and shimmering with unshed tears, were fixed on the man at the corner table. But Daddy, she started, then clamped her mouth shut, a stubborn set to her jaw. He knew that look. It usually preceded some grand, slightly disastrous adventure. He's eating, Leo pointed out, a last-ditch effort. Let's not bother people when they're eating, okay? He hated how weak his voice sounded, how unsure. He should be firmer, more authoritative. But his own heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. What if? Lily didn't respond. She simply took a breath and started walking. Leo watched, paralyzed, as she navigated the crowded aisles. He should stop her. He knew he should. But his legs felt rooted to the spot, his mind a whirlwind of anxieties and impossible hopes. The diner seemed to shrink around Lily as she walked, the clatter of cutlery and the murmur of conversations fading into a dull hum. All that mattered was the man with the silver hair and the expensive suit, the man who looked vaguely familiar, the man who might hold a piece of her mother. With each step, the clicking sound of Lily's Mary Janes against the checkered tile grew louder in Leo's ears, a metronome counting down to an unknown consequence. Click, click, click. Each footfall echoed the frantic beat of his heart. Arthur Sterling looked up as Lily approached, his expression a mask of polite indifference. He'd been meticulously dissecting a Cobb salad, the picture of refined composure. But as the little girl drew closer, something flickered in his eyes, a flicker of surprise, maybe even recognition. Lily stopped at the edge of his table, her small frame dwarfed by his imposing presence. She tilted her head back, her gaze unwavering. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling?" she asked, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. He set down his fork, the clatter oddly loud in the sudden silence that had fallen around them. "Yes," he replied, his voice a low rumble. Lily took a brave little step closer. Are you related to my mommy?" "Hello, Uncle." Arthur Sterling was meticulously cutting his steak, each movement precise and economical, as if the very act of eating was a business negotiation. Lily watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She hadn't meant to blurt it out, hadn't planned any of this, but seeing him sitting there, looking so familiar, had short-circuited her carefully constructed composure. She took a deep breath and approached his table. "Hello," she said, her voice a little wobbly. Mr. Sterling paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked up, his eyes, the color of polished granite, assessing her with a cool detachment that made her want to shrink. "Can I help you, little girl?" Lily swallowed. He didn't seem happy to see her. I think you might be my uncle." The man's expression didn't change. He simply blinked, then resumed cutting his steak. "I'm afraid you have the wrong person. But my mom was Clara Maxwell. She talked about her brother sometimes, before she got sick. She said he was very successful and lived far away. And you look like her. A little bit. Around the eyes." Lily felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away, determined to be brave. "I miss her so much," she whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She used to braid my hair and read me stories and—" She trailed off, unable to continue. The scent of the diner, usually comforting, suddenly felt suffocating. Mr. Sterling finally stopped eating. He placed his knife and fork carefully on his plate, the clink echoing in the sudden silence. He looked at Lily, really looked at her this time, and something flickered in his eyes, a hint of recognition? Confusion? Something unreadable, but definitely there. "Clara," he murmured, the name a ghost of a sound. He leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of carefully controlled composure. But Lily saw it, the brief, unguarded flash of something akin to pain. He reached out a hand, then hesitated, drawing it back. "Clara has had a daughter?" Lily nodded, tears finally escaping and tracing paths down her cheeks. I'm Lily." A faded photograph. The scrape of Leo's chair against the floor startled the diner into silence. Heat crawled up his neck as he rushed toward Lily and the formidable figure in the corner booth. "Mr. Sterling, my deepest apologies. Lily, come along." He reached for her hand, but she stood firm, her small features tilted toward Arthur Sterling. The man hadn't so much as twitched at the interruption. He remained seated, a morsel of steak suspended midair, his expression an inscrutable mask. The overhead lights caught the glint of his silver mane, etching the deep furrows around his eyes into stark relief. He resembled some ancient monument untouched by the minor earthquake Lily had caused. "Lily, we don't bother people while they're eating," Leo said, mortification tightening his throat. He tugged gently, yet Lily resisted, her grip surprisingly tenacious. "But she wanted to show him," Lily insisted, her voice small but resonant. She brandished the crumpled drawing, crayon marks smudging the paper. "My picture of Mommy." A pang shot through Leo's heart. He hadn't known she'd brought it. He glanced at Sterling, bracing for a display of impatience, perhaps even anger. Instead, the billionaire's gaze was riveted to the drawing, his face undergoing a subtle transformation from impassivity toward something that resembled recognition. Deliberately, Sterling set his fork down, the quiet clink amplifying in the sudden hush. He extended a hand, his fingers long and elegant despite their age, inviting her offering. "May I?" he rumbled, his voice resonating with a surprising depth. Leo hesitated, then nodded, surrendering to a feeling of helplessness. Eagerly, Lily placed the artwork in Sterling's grasp. He scrutinized it for what seemed an eternity, his brow knitted, his lips moving in a silent dialogue. The diner existed in a suspended state, the usual symphony of sounds replaced by an almost tangible quiet. Finally, Sterling raised his eyes, meeting Leo's with a piercing intensity that triggered a primal urge to retreat. "Stay put," he instructed, his voice gravelly. With newfound deliberation, he rose from the booth and headed toward the back, disappearing behind a door labeled private. Petrified, Leo watched, Lily's small hand of ice around his. He couldn't predict what was coming, couldn't formulate a single word. He only knew that the atmosphere had grown heavy, crackling with unspoken significance. He loathed the situation. He loathed Lily's desperate yearning for a mother she barely recalled, loathed the stark illumination of his own inadequacies as a lone parent in this very public drama. After an agonizing delay, Sterling reappeared. In his possession was a worn, leather wallet. With deliberate care, he opened it and retrieved a photograph, faded and well-worn. He presented it to Lily. "Is this her?" he queried, his voice almost inaudible. Lily gasped, her eyes widening like saucers. She reached out a delicate hand and traced the woman's face. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice brimming with unadulterated wonder. Leo peered closer, his breath seizing in his chest. The woman in the image was younger, her hair perhaps a shade lighter, but there was no denying the resemblance. It was Clara. Grandpa Arthur. The world swam back into focus for Arthur Sterling. Lily's drawing, still clutched in his hand, seemed to vibrate with a life of its own. A stick figure, undeniably Clara, stood next to a smaller stick figure holding a son. Below, scrawled in childish letters, was the word Mommy. He looked up at Leo, his face a mask of polite confusion, and then back at the drawing. It was the son that did it, a specific, almost childish way Clara had always drawn them, even on important architectural blueprints. He hadn't seen that son in decades. His breath hitched. He reached into his breast pocket, his fingers fumbling for the leather wallet. Inside, nestled among credit cards and faded receipts, was a photograph. Clara, radiant and laughing, her hair long and wild, stood on the bow of a sailboat. The wind whipped around her, mimicking the freedom in her eyes. He hadn't looked at this picture in years, not since, well, since it hurt too much. He held the photograph next to Lily's drawing. The resemblance, the echo of Clara in the girl's bright, inquisitive eyes, slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Please," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, sit down." He gestured to the empty chairs opposite him. Leo hesitated, his hand protectively on Lily's shoulder. Suspicion warred with a flicker of hope in his weary eyes. He glanced around the diner as if seeking an escape route. But Lily, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air, was already sliding into one of the chairs, her gaze fixed on Arthur's face. "Really?" Lily asked, her voice full of wonder. "We can sit here?" Arthur managed a weak smile, his gaze locked on Lily. He noticed the faint smudge of chocolate ice cream on her cheek. "Yes, dear? Please. Sit." He watched them settle, the father hunched slightly, radiating caution, the daughter alight with innocent curiosity. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Maxwell, isn't it? I believe there's something we need to discuss. Something about Clara." Leo's shoulders slumped. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the lines etched around his eyes deepening. Clara isn't around anymore," he said, his voice low and strained. Arthur shook his head, a surge of protectiveness rising within him. This man, this weary, kind-faced man, was raising his granddaughter. I understand that. But perhaps I can help. I can help you find her. He saw the disbelief in Leo's eyes, the almost imperceptible shake of his head. I have resources, Mr. Maxwell. Connections. If Clara doesn't want to be found, that's one thing. But you and Lily deserve to know. And I deserve to try. The words felt clumsy, inadequate, but they were the truth. He had spent years burying his guilt and regret. Now, faced with the living, breathing consequence of his choices, he had a chance to make amends. He wouldn't waste it. A family reunion. Arthur excused himself, a strange mix of apprehension and excitement churning in his gut. He walked towards the back of the diner, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, finally stopping on one labeled simply Reyes, discreet inquiries. Reyes was a man who could find anyone, anywhere, for the right price. Reyes? Sterling. I need you to locate someone for me. Clara Ramirez. She's an artist. Last known address was a studio apartment in Pilsen, Chicago. Time is of the essence. He relayed what little information he had, the hum of the diner, a dull background drone to his focused intensity. Call me when you have something. And Reyes' discretion is paramount. He hung up, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. He rejoined Leo and Lily, trying to appear nonchalant as Lily peppered Leo with questions about the different types of pie. He offered to buy them all dessert, the gesture feeling inadequate somehow. The bell above the door chimed, a rush of cold air swirling into the diner. A woman stood in the doorway, shaking off the last vestiges of winter. She was slender, with a vibrant scarf wrapped around her neck, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes scanned the room, a flicker of uncertainty in their depths. Lily gasped, her eyes widening. "Mama?" she whispered, scrambling out of the booth. The woman's gaze locked onto Lily, her face crumpling. "Lily!" she cried, rushing forward. She dropped to her knees, enveloping Lily in a tight embrace. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into Lily's hair. "Oh, my sweet girl, I've missed you so much." Leo stared, stunned, as Clara held Lily tightly. He rose slowly, his face a mixture of relief, disbelief, and lingering hurt. He hadn't seen Clara since she left them, no explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. Clara looked up at Leo, her eyes filled with remorse. "Leo." Arthur approached hesitantly. "Clara?" he asked softly. She looked at him, confusion etched on her face, then recognition dawned. "Mr. Sterling? What? What's going on?" "It's Arthur, please. And I believe I might be your father." Clara stared at him, then back at Lily, then back at Arthur, the emotions chasing each other across her face. Disbelief warred with a glimmer of hope. She reached out, her hand trembling, and touched Arthur's arm. Is this real?" Lily, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, clung to Clara, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "Mama, are you staying? Are you staying with us?" Clara tightened her hold on Lily, her gaze meeting Leo's. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history and uncertain futures. She looked at Arthur, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. I don't know," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want to. I really want to."